Welcome, fellow horror hounds, and welcome to the fourth episode of Talk and Stalk, your unholy home for horror. I'm Barry, this is my corrupted co-host, the sadist Samuel.
Thank you very much, Barry, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us in our dark descent into the infamous, the unknown, the unseen, and even the obscene.
Today we're actually going to be doing things a little differently. Our three previous podcasts have really been kind of ranking lists, 70s, golden age slasher movies, and of course horror films that we're looking forward to. I thought I'd do things differently. This time we're just going to be simply talking about a film that me and Samuel both love. It's a film that I've certainly seen many times. I'm going to assume Samuel probably has as well. And that is a film released at the end of 1996 called a little movie, you might have heard of it, called Scream. Scream obviously is a film I do love. I think it's hands down my favourite horror film of the 90s. It really did kind of revive the corpse of the slasher genre, if you will. I think the slasher genre was pretty much dead at this point, and then along came Scream, and obviously quickly become the highest grossing slasher movie of all time, and deservedly so. I think it's a great film. You know, it's a film that certainly celebrates the subgenre. It's a film that pays homage to it, while at the same time it in a way kind of wryly mocks the conventions that and certainly plays on the conventions that we've all come to know and love. Samuel, how many times would you say you've seen Scream?
It's to you. I would say about at least 20 times.
Yeah, that's probably not that it's a contest or anything, but yeah, that's probably roughly the amount of times that I've seen it. It was really because there was a lot of slasher films prior to Scream that I hadn't seen. Scream made me wanna go out and actually hunt some of these films down, namely films like Terror Train, 1980. I'd never even heard of Terror Train until Neve Campbell, Sidney Prescott, actually mentions it in the movie. And of course, the movie makes a hell of a lot of references, a lot of Easter eggs to films within the horror genre.
And I think that is one of the many strokes of genius within the film. Kim Newman, the author and film critic, I think after Craven passed away, he pointed out that Craven had changed the horror genre 3 times. Most horror filmmakers are lucky enough to change it even once, and it's I think it's interesting to think that the film that helped to change the horror genre in the 80s was of course Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street. With Scream though, it did something completely different with it, and I think that has to do with the ingenious writing by Kevin Williamson.
Definitely, and it's clear that Williamson has an ardent love for the genre, that he has a very astute knowledge of the genre. It's a fantastic screenplay, great direction by Wes Craven. It's really kind of a match made in heaven. Kevin Williamson was heavily inspired by Halloween, which is actually his favourite movie of all time. Not just his favourite horror film, but his favourite movie. And it's actually reported that he actually listened to the Halloween soundtrack over and over again while he was actually writing the screenplay.
The problem I have is that this isn't me, putting him down. It's very easy for people to claim that they're a fan, and unfortunately, sometimes with being a fan, that can, there are problems with that, and that can be quite blinding. There are plenty of examples to bring up. To be honest, I kind of had that sole thing with, the Halloween 18, with the direction and the writers on that one. I think they were slightly blinded. And however, I think Kevin Williamson, was closer to the likes of Peter Jackson or Sam Raimi, in that he uses his fandom to guide it into, rich new territory without risking anything sort of too blinded by nostalgia. I think that's one of the beautiful beauties of it. And to have Wes Craven, who would set himself up as a proper master of horror as well, that in itself is just, as you say, it's a pure gift.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, with Williamson as well, I mean, the original, probably a lot of people actually know this, but it was originally going to be called Scary Movie as well, which of course ended up becoming a film in its own right. Ended up, well, I think about 3 films too many. Well, let's kind of get the ball rolling and really kind of talk about the opening. I mean, the opening to this film is clearly a very loving homage to 1979's When a Stranger Calls, and very much sets the tone for the film. What's your take on the opening to this movie?
Well, let me put it this way. When I sat down, a partner of mine, they were wanting to watch it, and after the horrific events that would bestow on Drew Barrymore, they said, I don't want to watch this anymore. So the opening sets it up so brilliantly, and I think that actually led to some censorship issues, because Wes Craven said that it wasn't necessarily the blood or any of the violence, it was the intensity of the scene. And I think the opening itself is so intense, it's very unnerving. So I think that for me is that can draw people in, or that can actually scare a lot of audiences as well, and that seems to be the general reception.
It's very deftly directed. I think it's a stroke of genius casting the likes of Drew Barrymore, who was certainly one of the biggest stars of that film at that point, having her on the poster, much like Hitchcock did in 1960's Psycho. Killed off Janet Leigh. People couldn't believe it. Killed off a third of the way through the film. Wes Craven has Drew Barrymore in this movie, and she's killed within the first 10 minutes.
I'm glad that you said that, because I was going to say, surely that's going to be a nod to the likes of Psycho. However, when you mentioned When a Stranger Calls, I was very hesitant, so I'm glad that we're on sync with that one.
Yeah. When a Stranger Calls, it does certainly pay some homage to it. The thing is, with as well mentioning Psycho, there are a lot of nods from Scream to Psycho and Halloween. The character Billy Loomis, the surname Loomis, is in fact a nod to Dr. Sam Loomis from Halloween, and of course Dr. Sam Loomis is a nod to Janet Leigh's love interest Sam Loomis in Psycho. They all kind of pay homage to each other. Halloween in itself, Jamie Lee Curtis casting Janet Leigh's daughter, in the role was a fantastic homage to Psycho. I think the opening to Scream is just great. The homage. One of the lines I really like in this opening scene is when she realizes that, hang on, she's being watched. When he says, "I want to know who I'm looking at."
Oh, it's awful. That easily shifts it.
That's when alarm bells are ringing, and she says, "What did you say? I want to know who I'm talking to. That's not what you said. If you hang up on me again, I'll gut you like a fish."
Which is a reference to the Mutilator, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. What do you want? To see what your insides look like? There's a real Roger L. Jackson, who actually provided his voice for Ghostface, obviously provided his voice for all 4 Scream films, is suitably creepy and menacing on that telephone.
I'm happy for someone to fact check me on this. Roger L. Jackson would also voice Mojo Jojo in the Powerpuff Girls as well, the villain,
yes.
Sort of a super villain monkey. So
yes, he did. And
so that's a nice little transition.
Yeah, quite a contrast. Yeah. But the interesting thing as well, from what I know, all of the cast were never actually allowed to see him. Roger L. Jackson was actually kept separate from the cast. They had no idea who this man was on the other end of the telephone. So there was a great level of ambiguity to it. And also, on the telephone as well, to get some genuine fear, some genuine reactions from Drew Barrymore, Wes Craven actually, because Drew Barrymore's actually an animal rights activist. She's a massive animal lover. And Wes Craven actually went into stories of animals being hurt, blah, blah, etc., to actually get some genuine emotion and get Drew Barrymore upset for that scene. Some of them tears you saw were in fact genuine. And it can also, again, probably a lot of people know this, but when Casey Becker, Drew's character, actually hits Ghostface with a telephone, that was in fact Wes Craven actually in the mask, and he actually got a bruise there for his troubles as well. But I thought it was
well, it certainly seemed to pay off.
Yeah, it's a fantastic opening. It's already become quite iconic. I mean, you know, Scary Movie just a few years later obviously parodied it in its opening scene. They're just a real kind of level of menace, and you know, the costume. Let's talk about Ghostface, because it's already become a very iconic costume. I remember watching Scream, and I kid you not, after one viewing, I just wanted to go out and buy a Ghostface costume because I just thought it looked cool.
I did that a few years back at university for Halloween, and dressed up as Ghostface. The thing is, though, some people got it. Some people were actually really terrified. Because I think when you've got someone who's like 6'3", 6'4", walking around, not even walking, cautiously stalking around the corners and that some people were quite distraught.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just a cool costume. That's the thing. It's just a really cool costume, and it's the really ironic thing is that you've got all of these horror movie icons, you know, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger and Michael. The ironic thing is, Ghostface isn't a character. Ghostface is multiple killers. Ghostface is just a costume. But it's almost like Ghostface has become a character in his own right due to the costume and the voice on the telephone.
Which I remember you mentioning a while back. We were talking about sort of collector's items of figurines, that we've got some for Myers, we've got some for Kruger, we've got some for Voorhees, but we never have any for the actual Ghostface character. Actually, you say that, yeah, as I said, it's not even a character in itself. However, I think that's what makes it more terrifying. It's more than a person, it's an idea. However, what is the idea? And well, that's the thing.
Well, yeah, it's the thing is, the ironic thing is, the term Ghostface everyone knows now, but the name Ghostface is only mentioned in the first movie I'm talking about here. Ghostface is mentioned by Tatum, because when you actually look at the costume, when they find the costume and Dewey and Sheriff Burke look at the costume, if you look at the packaging, it's actually listed as Father Death. That's what the costume is actually listed as. But the whole Ghostface term, in a way, was kind of inadvertently coined by Tatum. And obviously the mask, the film's called Scream, and the mask is actually inspired by Edvard Munch's, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, Edvard Munch's famous painting, The Scream. That is what the mask is actually modelled on.
Which makes perfect sense, and I'm glad that someone else. I'm glad that you flagged up on this. And I remember, like, when the DVD sort of box set came out as well, the cover was just black, and you just have the face of Ghostface. It's so simple, so effective, so iconic. It just shows, less is more in this case.
I just love, like, with the opening, Halloween gets mentioned, Nightmare on Elm Street gets mentioned, Friday the 13th gets mentioned. Now, when Nightmare on Elm Street gets mentioned and Drew Barrymore says, well, the first one was right, but the rest sucked. Now, Wes Craven actually directed Wes Craven's New Nightmare just a couple of years before Scream came out. Is Wes Craven slating his own film there? Or does he not consider it a sequel because it's obviously postmodern and set within the real world?
I think that is certainly a good possibility for it. I think it is just more of a generalized statement, because you can't be too nitpicky, because you can't just go, was it, I like the first one, the rest sucked. Although, that said, the last one was kind of good. I think that would have overstretched it too long, I'd say. I
disagree with the whole, I don't want to go off topic here, but with Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 Dream Warriors, that's a good film. I think that's a good...
Only because of that one-liner.
Welcome to primetime, bitch. Certainly one of the most iconic. I still love from the original movie, I'm your boyfriend now, Nancy. I love that little bit, and this is God. But you're right.
That's horrible, though. That's the Welcome to Primetime was funny, whereas this is God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just scary. That's just very unsettling.
But I like as well, Casey Becker, Drew Barrymore's character, as she mentions Halloween, how she pulls the knife out, the big kitchen knife out, right as she says Halloween as well, which again is a little nod to Michael Myers, because that's obviously his weapon of choice. But yeah, it's a great open. I mean, let's talk about the casting. I mean, Neve Campbell made for a great final girl, a scream queen, if you will.
And the weird thing with Scream is that it completely throws a lot of the slasher rules out of the book, because by definition of being the final girl, there's supposed to be a virginal aspect to the final girl. However, this sort of blows it completely out of proportion with that aspect.
Yeah, well, she has sex, but interestingly, it's purposely done and shot where her breasts are not seen. She's actually obscured by Skeet Ulrich, Billy Loomis. So she does lose her virginity, but at the same time, we don't get any inclination of the act. We don't actually see her topless. But I think Neve Campbell's a really good actress, actually. And obviously she was in The Craft, which is a good fun film. I really enjoy The Craft. That came out earlier in the year. And of course, she starred alongside Skeet Ulrich was in that as well. And Skeet Ulrich, let's face it, was great as Billy Loomis, who really did. He's kind of the prime suspect, really. Quite early on in the film, he becomes the prime suspect. And then, of course, it's too obvious. It's way too obvious. And then, of course, well, we know what happens. Because I don't know about you, right? But I mean, I'm gonna apologise to anyone here. There's going to be spoilers. I'm going to assume that most people have seen Scream. But of course, there are two killers in this movie. Billy Loomis being one of them, Stu Macker being the other. I don't know about you, Samuel. I didn't see that coming.
Well, I mean, at first, no, there was that suspicion. I mean, I did kind of sucker in more to Matthew Lillard being the killer. However, when it's revealed them being the both of them, I just thought that's absolutely fantastic. What's weird though is that on hindsight, part of me's like, no, actually, it makes sense, because I don't know if you would see this as well. The way that both the killers are similar yet very different. Let's talk more of the difference. For some reason, it reminded me of Henry and Otis in Henry of a Portrait of a Serial Killer. The fact that there's two killers and they're two very different. One of them's calm, more depraved, more silent, more calm and cold, whereas the other one is a little bit more over the top. Yeah. So the chemistry between those two is extremely well executed,
especially in at the end. Now, when you watch it a second time, you actually notice there's little looks, there's little nods to each character. It's quite subtly done. There's a moment in the video store where, as Billy's leaving, he actually gives Stu this real kind of intense kind of look, as if to say, "Do you know what I mean? We're up to something here." The killer reveal I thought was great. We all go a little mad sometimes, and obviously he turns the gun on Randy, of course, and a great little nod to Psycho, and then corn syrup, same stuff they use for pig's blood in Carrie.
And then Matthew Lillard appears, and then surprise!
Matthew Lillard just knocks it out of the park in that final scene, especially in the climax of that movie. I mean, there was a lot of improv there. The whole "I always had a thing for you, Sid" was improv. And when Neve Campbell replies and says, "In your dreams," that was all improv. That wasn't in the original script. And of course, when he hit him with a phone, that was an accident. You hit me with a phone, Dick. He absolutely knocks it out of the park in the end.
I think there's so much to compliment about the ending. There is one thing, though. There's not even one line. There's two lines in particular that sort of summarizes some of Wes Craven's career or philosophy, if you like. It's when they're stabbing each other, she says, "You sick. You've seen one or too many movies," and then then Billy Loomis gives that amazing line, "Don't you blame the movies? Movies don't create psychos. Movies make psychos more creative."
Great line.
And, bearing in mind that The Last House on the Left was banned as a video nasty for decades in this country. Yeah. I think it was still on video by the time Scream had came out, and a lot more people were like, "Oh, we need to go see this." So that in itself is it's a nice little subtle yet very effective sort of mindset, an idea of Craven's own sort of view.
Yeah, it makes a lot of commentary. I mean, it does certainly make some commentary about the whole. I mean, that line I loved. I actually bought a T-shirt a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if I ever showed you it, but I actually bought a Scream T-shirt with that line on it. I really do like that line. Also, you know, quickly to say that in a way, Stu's the scarier killer. He's the more goofy of the two, certainly. The reason I say scarier, Billy's clearly out there for revenge. Stu's doing it just because it's fun.
There's a lot more of a sadistic element to it. But I think also there's, weirdly enough, it's not even hammy. There's a hammy element to Lillard's performance, but not in a bad way. I say more in a over-the-top way that you would find in some of the more classic horrors, which the defining aspect would be this terrifying yet sort of hammy performance, whereas it's very uncannily done. But then again, he did a very similar job with bringing a hammy performance in an uncanny manner in the Scooby-Doo films.
Yeah.
So the one line in particular that is too real is was it everybody dies but us, we get to carry on and plan the sequel, because let's face it, baby, these days you gotta have a sequel. The enthusiasm,
and he's actually drooling at that point as well.
No, it's so depraved, it's so sadistic, and you're just like, this feels too real. It's such a damn good performance.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
That's got plenty of references.
Face it, your mum was no Sharon Stone. Huh?
Oh, you cheeky one. Oh, what was we at behind number door 3, Sydney?
What's that?
What's behind door number 3, Sydney?
Yeah. Obviously, the father was a suspect. I'm sure upon first viewing, the father was certainly a suspect. Obviously, a red herring, as addressed in the movie, actually by Randy. And you know, speaking of Randy, Jamie Kennedy, again, great character.
Oh, definitely. Do you know what? The video store sequence is probably my favourite because of the self-awareness. Was it, if you were the only suspect in a senseless bloodbath, would you be standing in the horror section? Well, you didn't do anything. You're such an old lapdog. Yeah. It's prom night all over again. It's just, well, if the police watch prom night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it, a very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect. Yeah. And then was it? Yeah. If this was a movie, I'd be the prime suspect. Yeah. Well, what would be your motive?
I like at the end.
Millennium.
I like at the end actually,
incidental,
where he says, "What is it?" He says, "I never thought I'd be so happy to be a virgin."
That's
before
right.
Getting punched out by Billy. Yeah, Jamie Kennedy did a great job. Just to quickly get back to Billy Loomis. Interesting little fact here. Billy Loomis, one of the reasons he was cast apparently is because, now I don't actually see it myself, but there's a lot of people that seem to think he looks a bit like Johnny Depp. And of course, Johnny Depp made his big break in A Nightmare on Elm Street, which Wes Craven directed him in. So in a way, Wes Craven's kind of paying tribute to his own movie.
I see that. No, I do see that.
Oh, I've never been able to see it myself. I know a lot of people do. But I like the fact that obviously when he sneaks through Sydney's bedroom in Scream, that's obviously again a nod to Glenn going in Nancy's bedroom in A Nightmare on Elm Street. And of course also a little nod to Halloween. The song that plays in the bedroom while they're making out before obviously Sydney pushes him off is Don't Fear the Reaper, but it's a ballad version. Of course, Don't Fear the Reaper is the song that was featured in Halloween. It's a cover version of the Halloween song, which plays in the car when Laurie is being drove by Annie. But yeah, I thought, Jamie Kennedy, I love the scene, Samuel, where he mentions the rules to survive a horror movie.
All right, first of all, guys, say your knowledge is never, do you know what? It never ceases to amaze me. That is something I did not know. So, applaudances to you, good sir. With the rules, oh no, that's the amount of times I've watched that scene again, like laying out the rules. Big no. Secondly, no drinking or drugs. Yeah, it's a sin. There's a sin factor. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, any circumstances say I'll be right back, because you would be back.
And then, of course, Stu, I'm getting another beer. Anyone want one? I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. Oh,
Yeah.
I think it's just the reaction of all the other kids, and then just seeing Randy just pointing at him, just like, seriously,
I'll see
you're
you in the
pointing that on
kitchen
me.
with a knife. Yeah, I'll see you in the kitchen with a knife. And let's talk about, like I say, yeah, Neve Campbell made for a great scream queen. I'm going to go out and say this, right? The Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott is the best scream queen since Jamie Lee Curtis.
No, I'd agree with that. I couldn't see another contender. No, not of any same substance. So I'll agree with that.
She's resilient. She's tough when she needs to be. She's a good actress. She's a great scream queen. Rose McGowan in the film as her friend Tatum, who actually has a line I love in the film. I love the fact that John Carpenter and Wes Craven both get a nod when she says, "You're starting to sound like this is some Wes Carpenter flick."
Yeah, you mentioned that before.
Dropping in Wes Craven and John Carpenter in just kind of as a mismatch. This is one you'd like, of course, because I know you like I Spit on Your Grave. I'm sure you picked up on this one. In the garage, shortly before her death, she says, "What movie is this from? I Spit on Your Garage."
Oh, do you know what? Wow. No, I do. I think I did pick it up, but I didn't never fully processes it like that. Wow.
Yeah, even I Spit on Your Grave gets kind of a half a mention. Yeah. But yeah, she was great in the role. Let's face it, she has, aside from the opening, she has the most memorable death.
It's an obscure one, however, yeah, it's creative. You gotta give them that.
Getting the neck broken, trying to fit through a cat flap, which of course again they parodied in Scary Movie. To quite funny effect, actually. I didn't particularly care for Scary Movie. I thought it was okay, but I thought the parody of that bit, because she was clearly a very big girl, and she was trying to fit oh man, yeah. But yeah, and of course the other two big ones, David Arquette and Courtney Cox,
who I believe would go on to forming a strong relationship after that. So that certainly has a lot of personal significance. Courtney Cox, I did think was very good in that. I think 96. Now, feel free to correct me. I think Friends had just had a couple of seasons being shown, so sort of developing sort of a rise in popularity. So it's definitely something a little bit different. And no, I thought it was an effective role again. I was quite satisfied seeing her at the end of the film holding the gun up. Yeah. Sort of like, we kind of know where it was going to go because we still had another 10-15 minutes of the film. However, it was still like, yeah, she's got more to her.
I love the scene with her cameraman, Kenny. Look, Kenny, I know you're about 50 pounds overweight, but when I say, what is it, hurry, interpret that as move your fat tub of lard ass now. She's such an unlikable character, but strangely likable at the same time, isn't she?
I think her intentions are almost completely gold, though. I think because of that, the little narrative about the suspect of
Cotton Weary.
Yeah, so she's determined to prove a man innocent, and that she doesn't believe the complete story. So the intention is somewhat there. However, there's a bit of a seedy, so there's a bit of a corruption to that because she's out to get the big numbers.
Yeah, but you're right. She's very career driven. She'll do anything to sell a story and that. But yeah, Friends first aired in 1994. Of course, she was in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective in 94 alongside Jim Carrey. And she was even in Masters of the Universe back in 87. But David Arquette, they were basically flirting on set. They were getting to know each other on set. By the second film, they were actually in a relationship. They were dating. The third movie, they were actually married. And I think by the fourth movie, they were actually on the verge of divorce. So in a way, the Scream franchise actually chronicles their relationship.
There's certainly quite a personal significance, for better or worse, though. Yeah. I wonder how they'd feel about that, because I wonder if that might either sweeten or even sour, sort of looking back on their careers or even their relationship with such a connection.
Yeah. Now, here's one for you. Here's a quick question for you. In the movie, in Scream, can you remember a comment made by a character, and David Arquette Dewey actually makes a note of the film, and he actually says, "Oh, I know that movie it's about." Can you remember what film gets mentioned?
Something about it was some valley or something to do with the village of the Sun People.
You're kind of like etching there the town that dreaded sundown.
Sun. Okay, it was to do with the sun. Right,
yeah,
yes.
Released in '76. It's about a killer in Texas. That's his. Because I'll be honest, upon first viewing, obviously we didn't know the character. Obviously, the characters appeared in all 4 films. He was originally going to be killed off in the original Scream. He was to be killed off, but he proved to be too popular. They actually had him survive. But in the first movie, Dewey to me was a suspect, definitely. What about you?
Without question, it was too kind and too supportive on that. Because of how he interacted with Sydney. In fact, Scary Movie played a parody of this with Dewey. In fact, they sort of crossed him with that of verbal kint from The Usual Suspects, trying to play him off. Oh, he's too innocent. He's too in a state to be somewhat harmless. So they play on that very well. Very well. The Hugh did it element of the Scream is, I think, very well done.
Oh, it is, definitely. I would actually go out and say it's one of the best, if not the best, whodunit slasher film out there. I really do think that.
I can certainly do that. I think it's because the combination of better acting, better direction, better writing, better execution. All in all, most certainly, I'd support that.
Now let's talk about some little things. Let's talk about some of there's a couple of moments in the film that don't kind of make sense to me. This isn't me nitpicking or anything like that, because it's a great movie. I think we all know that by now, that I'm passionate about this film. But there's a couple of moments in the film. Do you remember the scene in the grocery store where Tatum and Sydney are doing their shopping, and there's a Ghostface in there? Do you see the reflection of Ghostface?
No, it is that. For some reason, I thought it was outside near the bushes. No, it's actually in the grocery store.
Oh no, there's another scene by the bushes as well. Who the hell's going about in broad daylight in the Ghostface costume? Because, I mean, there's witnesses. They're in a grocery store. There's people in the grocery store, etc. That scene always made no sense to me.
But maybe I think that's perhaps the point. There's no rational explanation for it. Perhaps it's trying to create this. Perhaps it's trying to create this element that they know exactly what they're doing. Because what scene comes after it?
I don't actually recall. Not off the top of my head. It just felt a little out of place. I can kind of understand why it's put there. We'd not seen the Ghostface costume for a little while, so they kind of wanted to show off the Ghostface costume in scenes. But I just thought it was strangely odd, because it's broad daylight in a grocery store and Ghostface walks in. It just it just felt a little out of place. Felt a little out of place to me. And there was also another little bit. Again, this isn't like a major gripe or anything. But earlier, now I understand she wasn't probably in a right frame of mind. She was panic-stricken, etc. But if you remember, when she's in Kenny before he gets his throat cut, she's in the van and she sees, which I thought was an awesome scene, by the way. I love the bit where Randy's watching Halloween and he's saying, "Look behind you, Jamie, look behind you." And the killer's sneaking up behind him. I love that moment. Basically, so she sees the killer behind Randy. She runs out, but then later, Stu and Randy are both looking for refuge in the house. They're telling her she should know it's not Randy because the killer was behind Randy.
Yeah, do you know what? That's I suppose. But then again, I think you've created the point. It's a state of panic.
Probably,
You're absolutely right. Though I mean, in that state, no, Stu is blatantly the main suspect because, of course, Billy is supposedly dead.
Yeah.
However, I suppose when you've got all these people who've just been killed and we still don't know who the killer is, I guess you can't really trust anyone, really, can you? Especially when the twist is revealed that it's not the one.
Great moment, because as soon as Billy is thought to be killed, that's it. You're like, God, no, it's not Billy. I got that wrong. But yeah, that was Skeet Ulrich in the costume there, by the way, sneaking up to Randy while Randy's watching Halloween. That was Skeet Ulrich's one and only scene in the Ghostface costume. What about
Matthew Lillard?
Matthew Lillard? I don't
ever wear the
believe he had
costume?
any scenes as Ghostface. No, I'm pretty certain he didn't.
I suppose that would be too much of a giveaway, wouldn't it? Because if people picked up on the inconsistencies of height,
he's 6'3",
they'd be like,
isn't he? 6'3", yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also just to quickly note as well, a couple of cameos I love in this film. There's a kind of blink and you'll miss it from Linda Blair, from one of the biggest horror movies of all time, The Exorcist, and of course Wes Craven himself, in which I thought was a great cameo.
Were you talking about the Freddy Krueger cameo?
As the janitor, and his name is Fred. Yeah, he's got the hat on, he's got the red and green striped jumper. Yeah, and I think he calls Principal Himbry a prick as well. Obviously, Principal Himbry was the Fonz, weren't it? Henry Winkler. Yes,
that's who I was going to talk about next. He had an amazing scene when he talks to those two kids. Like, how insensitive are you? I'd hang you up to expose the world to the desensitized little shits that you are.
Yeah.
The French. And it was so satisfying, considering considering that he came from, it was Happy Days.
Yes.
So considering he came from that, I think that was a pleasant surprise. In fact, they didn't want to advertise him too much when they were marketing the film, because they didn't want it to, him to be, to steal the film's thunder, if you like. So it was a nice little surprise to all of you who are, fans of that show.
Yeah, and let's face it, he was uncredited as well. He was actually uncredited in Scream. And also, this has got to be noted, okay, because I don't know how many people picked up on this. I don't know how many people watch end credits if they, turn off right at the beginning or whatever. But originally, this film was going to be shot in Santa Rosa High School. And the moment the high school actually found out that this was going to be a horror movie, they pulled out and they said, no, you're not filming here. And eventually they found somewhere else. I think it was the Sonoma Community Centre, okay? That really annoyed the studio and Wes Craven because, they were ready to film there, etc. In the credits, it actually says, no thanks whatsoever to Santa Rosa High School. They actually say that in the end credits.
That's so embittered. Do you know what? It's probably the second most embittered thing I've ever read in the credits of a film.
Oh, what's the first?
It's a short film by Alex Chandon. He did a short film years and years ago. I think it's through Dark Side Magazine. And at the end of it, in the credits, it just says, fuck BBFC. Like, pardon the French. Because there's a real middle finger to the censorship that was happening. So I think so far, that's a good entry.
Yeah, it's there's just so many quotable lines in Scream. It's just so well written. Great screenplay, some great direction, great cast. It's just got all the right ingredients. I mean, Scream isn't a film that I find scary. I don't think it really intends to kind of go all out. I mean, don't get me wrong, it has moments that are certainly very suspenseful, but it really is just kind of a homage, a love letter to the films that me and you love, and so many people out there.
I think that's where knowledge is power. I think because if you're someone who takes on face value without the knowledge, without, like, as I said with the person whom I watched it with, if you're not someone who's familiar with it, then the atmosphere, the intensity of it, very much like with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that is what people will find genuine scary. It's a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding of the kind of feature you're with. And in fact, speaking of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, censorship. This film received a few issues with censorship. It was going to be given the NC-17 rating, but it had to receive a few cuts and re-edits in order to get the R rating, a more accessible rating. So the bit where Drew Barrymore's character is hanging in the trees by her guts, like, as you pointed out, it's a mannequin, it was supposed to be a lot slower, so much more scary and more slowed down, but it was sped up so that the scene was dealt with sooner rather than later. So, ironically, censorship actually sort of helped this film.
That's true. And let's face it as well. how quick did what's your favourite scary movie? How long did it take for that to become a pretty famous line?
Oh, definitely. Although I think, to be honest, my favorite answer is in the sequel, Scream 2, but
Showgirls.
that's a different story.
Well, I don't know about you, Samuel, because I actually like Scream 2 almost as much as the first. I think as sequels go, it's one of the best horror sequels out there, in my opinion. I would certainly like to do a sequel to this and talk about Scream 2 at some point.
Well, we kind of have to, because let's face it, baby, these days, you gotta have a sequel.
Exactly. We're not going to get our knives out and start stabbing each other, though, are we?
No, I'll bring my chainsaw into the mix.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we could talk about this film for a hell of a lot longer. You know, like I said, I'm sure there's a lot more lines out there that I probably haven't mentioned. You know, I love when Sydney gets her first call, you know, and the question isn't who am I? The question is where am I? Where are you? Your front porch. Just that stuff. It's just, you know, suspenseful. And the way Ghostface, by the way, comes out of that closet, I'm pretty certain is kind of a nod again to Halloween. How Michael Myers comes out of the closet to Bob in Halloween. He almost comes out the same way.
Again, like, it's those subtleties that I have to applaud you for. That's something I don't think I necessarily picked up on in the first few attempts. However, do you know what? I'll absolutely take your word for it. Your knowledge is admirable, almost envious.
I just it's just a film I love, and like I say, I mean, it's without a doubt that Halloween, and there's a few other slasher films that I would put in my like top horror films of all time. Scream's just a film that clicked with me. It really did click. Like I say, I wanted to buy the Ghostface costume. I bought some Scream merchandise in that over the years. I've seen the film, like I say, 20 times. I've seen Scream 2 just as many. I've seen Scream 2 probably between 15 to 20 times as well. You know, but I love the old school slasher film. The very films that, and obviously, let's face it, Scream opened the floodgates again for more to come out. We had I Know We Did Last Summer, we had Urban Legend, Cherry Falls, Valentine. There was a lot of slasher flicks coming out after, but none of them, now there were some good ones, but none of them could come close to Scream and what Scream did.
Well, that just simply exemplifies, you know, it's not, you know, a trend may be one thing, but it's about who you have on board. I mean, I feel free to correct me, I don't think we had anyone as distinguished or as refined as Williamson or Craven behind the reins. No,
we didn't. I mean, he was actually, I believe he wrote the screenplay for I Know What You Did Last Summer that kind of differs from the book somewhat. I like it. It's a fun slasher flick. It kind of goes back to the old school slasher flicks of the 80s. I Know What You Did Last Summer is the kind of film that Scream is mocking. So in a way it's kind of taken a step backwards, but I Know What You Did Last Summer I still thought was not a bad slasher film for what it was. An Urban Legend I thought was fun. I thought that was a fun slasher flick. It had some pretty kind of inventive kills there, etc. But yeah, Scream just did something that none of the others did. And that was, like I say, a very clever script. A film that said, look, we know all these horror films exist. We're going to have a bit of fun with it. You know,
I'd love to know. I'd love to. If I did have a TARDIS, I'd love to see, like, meet all these proper horror fanboys who went to see it in '96, who have the knowledge that we have, or more so, and just see them just sort of nerd out and just talk about it. I think that is, for me, one thing I'd love to observe, or even just seeing mainstream audiences get completely terrified by it.
Yeah, Scream is a film I'd have loved to have seen on the big screen. I envy anyone that gets to see it for the first time. Psycho is a film I would have loved to have seen on the big screen. I just can't imagine how shocking that shower scene would have been. Even Nightmare on Elm Street. There's certain movies that I would have loved to have been there at the time, upon release.
Oh, definitely, because I think with what's been kicking off, we've had a few classics that are being re-shown at the cinema. I recently went to see A Nightmare on Elm Street on the big screen, and are also showing Psycho as well as The Exorcist. However, it's just not part of the cultural moment. To have seen The Exorcist back in '73, again, like with Scream in '96, to see it in those moments, I think, is crucial.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, then. Well, I think that concludes today's episode. Thanks to everyone for listening. And we'll be back again soon for a sequel, and we're also going to be doing a list of our favourite horror movie remakes as well, which has been a bit of a struggle. There's a few films in there that certainly belong in there, but then there's a few others that me and Samuel have some differing opinions on. So I'm looking forward to doing that one. I'm sure you are, Samuel.
I think it's definitely going to be one of the more controversial subject matters, though. I think I probably will look forward more to the worst horror remakes. However, this provides a nice, fun little challenge for us, so I accept it.
Okay, well, yeah, thanks again for listening, and we'll be back again soon to torment you, haunt you, and, well, whatever else we can do to you. So, yeah, I'll say adios for now. And
farewell to you all, indeed.
Take care.